Pennsylvania will play a pivotal role in this presidential election, as it does in most recent election cycles. Per the latest New York Times polling, Harris and Trump virtually neck and neck in the state, with Harris at 49% and Trump at 48%. The swing state has sided with the winner in the past two elections. No surprise then that Harris and Trump have both been frequent visitors to Pennsylvania in recent weeks. And as a reminder, Biden flipped Pennsylvania in 2020 by winning big in Philadelphia and scoring bigger margins in the suburbs around Pittsburgh. In Philadelphia back in 2016, Trump narrowly won Pennsylvania, carrying predominantly rural or suburban counties.
Listen to Trump recently appealing to Pennsylvanians in the Wilkes-Barre Township.
This is a very consequential vote in Pennsylvania because they say that if you win Pennsylvania, you're going to win the whole thing. We cannot let these people win Pennsylvania.
Meanwhile, Harris spent part of her Labor Day in Pittsburgh speaking to a crowd of labor union workers with President Biden. Let's watch.
Ballots in Pennsylvania will start dropping in 14 days. 14 days. And this election is, as much as anything else, a fight for the promise of America. For the promise of America. We love our country. We love our country. And we know it is one of the highest forms of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. And that's what this election is about. And about the promise of America. And I don't need to tell unions what the promise looks like. It's what you do every day.
She wasted no time right afterwards hosting a rally in Philly. We were curious to hear how the debate played in the pivotal state. And for that, we turned to Julia Terruso of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks for coming on, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get into this. How do you think this debate will specifically impact the voters in Pennsylvania that Harris needs to carry the state?
Yeah, well, I think the target audience for both campaigns are those undecided voters in states like Pennsylvania. And what we know about that group is that it's a small group. It's about 3% of the electorate, although there's a larger number, about 10%, who say in polls they could still change their mind. So I think that overall, Vice President Harris did a slightly better job of directing her message at the center, goading the former president into some of the behaviors and Trumpisms that we know some moderate voters, some undecided voters feel can be alienating. And I've talked to some Republicans here in the state today who, echoed just that they might have had some frustrations with the moderators, but that they also think it was a bit of a missed opportunity for the former president to speak to those voters in the center who are really looking for, any excuse to kind of go in either direction.
I think it was very much, yes, the verdict by pundits, media professionals, that Kamala Harris did a somewhat better job, in part because of the reasons you mentioned, Donald Trump having to fight a couple times with the moderators themselves. But I have heard a more mixed review from swing voters, particularly on the economic plans presented. And that's really going to make a difference, I suspect, in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris's record on energy, green issues. She got asked about renouncing her previous stance on fracking and all of that. Do you think this tiny sliver of voters overall in the electorate and in Pennsylvania who will make the difference in this election, they were paying attention, I understand, to those messages in particular that started out being talked about in the debate, but I don't know that either candidate really offered a plan that spoke to them.
Yeah, there's style and there's substance, right? And I think that for a lot of voters, the most important question was that first question about inflation at the top of the debate. And in Pennsylvania, the top issue is the economy. And a lot of, voters I talk to here are frustrated. They're not sure if either candidate has a plan for them. And I think, you're absolutely right that there wasn't a ton of substance from either candidate on how to address the economic concerns that the Pennsylvanians have. And for the big attack coming into this debate was from former President Trump, with some of these issues that the vice president has flip-flopped on, including fracking, which is an issue in Pennsylvania. She addressed fracking. She didn't address as many of those other issues head on. It didn't really become a focus of the debate, though. So whether that remains a question for voters, I think it might, but it also wasn't something that he really capitalized on pointing out in the debate either.
Kamala Harris at one point specifically talked about voters in Pennsylvania, pointing to the record of approving additional fracking permits being the deal-breaking vote in the key piece of legislation following COVID in the Inflation Reduction Act. She talked a lot about bringing manufacturing jobs back and having the endorsement of the UAW's president, Shawn Fain. She spoke about the $50,000 in a tax deduction for startups, $6,000 for young families in the first year of their child's life, and allowing people to pursue home ownership through providing down payment assistance. Are any of these issues you think could win over some of the working class Pennsylvanians that feel like, maybe the Democratic Party had left them behind in the past?
Yeah, I think Pennsylvania is a state that, especially in its big cities and some of its small towns, a lot of people are living below the poverty line. The child tax credit was a big game changer for a lot of families in Pennsylvania, and it's a policy that is very popular, and I think that's why we continue to hear the vice president talking about it. I think the question is how some of those more specific plans help convince voters who are really focused on the price of their groceries and their rent going up, and making that connection to kind of the longer term plan to drive down some of these economic concerns.
So can we ask you for predictions? The state is so close right now. Pennsylvania is the must-win state for both candidates. I was a little thrown by Kamala Harris's decision not to choose the sitting governor, Josh Shapiro, who is very popular and has a proven winning record. Not even talking about the issues or policies, but just someone who has a track record of winning in this very closely divided must-win state. Even if that was worth a small increase in the votes she might get in Pennsylvania, that would seem to me like it would be worth it. So where do we stand right now with the election, 60 days away?
Yeah, I think we stand in a dead heat, and it's looking very neck and neck in Pennsylvania. In the polls that we've seen, the state is just one that, because of its geography, its demographics, it tends to be a close state, and I think we're going to continue to see that. We'll see if this debate moves the needle at all. Most people I'm talking to, even if they have a clear perspective on who did better, they're not sure that it's really gonna change too much in the polls. We'll see. So bearing any sort of surprises in the next 2 months, I think it'll remain close, and it really could come down to can Harris define herself for these voters who are flirting with voting for her? Can she turn out her base? And for Trump, can he hold on to the numbers he's grown in different parts of Pennsylvania and maybe win back some of the voters who flipped from him to Biden last year?
Julie, I'm curious how Pennsylvanians have been receiving J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, the VP picks of either presidential candidate. Of course, Josh Shapiro was in the running. What do you make of their reception in the state?
I think the Veep stakes were big for us in Pennsylvania because the governor was on that short list. But what I've learned in the week since is that I really do think voters are focused on the top of the ticket. Vance and Walz have made several visits to the state, and I think they will continue to. And I think both campaigns are actually looking for a similar thing from both of the governor and the senator. Appealing in these more Rust Belt or even rural parts of Pennsylvania where President Biden did better than Hillary Clinton had done in 2016, and where Democrats are hoping to pull more votes out. But at the same time, those are a lot of places where former President Trump also pulled more votes out than he had in his first presidential run. So I think they're looking for and getting similar things from both candidates. Governor Walz was, I think, nursing a young cow in Lancaster, and J.D. Vance has been talking about his upbringing. So they're hoping that'll boost some appeal in these areas that aren't traditionally, for Democrats, aren't traditionally Democratic strongholds, and that for Republicans, they're hoping will continue to pull out more Republican votes.
Julia, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.